Welcome. During my Friday webinar series, I wanted to do something back. I heard so many questions, so many requests of people asking help, especially during COVID. So I thought, you know what, I can offer help by offering time and knowledge. So what we're going to do is there is 5 webinars in a row, all covering a major part of sales in essence. So today we're going to start with the sales foundations, and I'm going to put my little clock here to, let's say, about 35 minutes, maybe a little bit less, so that there is some time to answer questions. You can go to the chat, questions, ask questions there, just ask. I will not pay attention to it in the first part because I want to focus on the storyline, right? And then just keep asking the questions. I'll go through at the end. So let's kick this off. And let's start with the start. If we think about sales, and the more salespeople I meet, I always get the same effect. People, no, let's rephrase this. Sales difficult. You get no every single time. And because of that no, it's becoming difficult and difficult. And what you get actually is sales is like swimming in the lake of rejection because you get no so many times. One second, I'm going to stop all these notifications because it's driving me mad. So there we go again. So you get no every single time. So one of the things you got to learn in this whole sales thing is how can you live with rejection? How can you learn to deal with this no? Because one of the things you'll learn as we go along through this presentation that no might just be no for now, but it might not be a no in 6-7 months. And we'll see that when we start talking about follow-up in sales. Now, when I think about sales, I think of these guys. A lot of people tell me, yeah, Michael, I'm not a typical sales guy. I'm pretty sure 90% of you are saying, I'm not a typical sales guy. I'm either an expert or I've never done sales or whatever. And it's a mistake. I actually believe that these guys are actually not the best sales because they look sales and we don't trust them. And we know, oh, they're gonna take big margins, right? Every time I go to I buy a car, I go to the shop, and every time I look at these guys and I go like, oh boy, I'm in for a roll, right? Now, the reality is very different. When I go to companies, the reality is something very, very different. The reality of sales teams looks like this. It is fundamentally chaotic and very social by nature. There is always something happening, always something going on, right? And that's okay. That is what sales is. A lot of sales overcompensate the social behavior by being very unstructured. That is why a lot of your bosses, and that is why you probably struggle with CRM, which is a completely different topic. In 4 webinars, I'm going to talk about how to run sales teams and all of that. Now, today, I want to talk about you, I want to talk about sales. And for me, sales actually sits right in the middle between everything that is marketing, generating leads, and then you have the sales part, and then of course you have what I call customer success. If your customers are happy with your stuff, well, they will come back, they will buy more, and if you do it really well, they will become your ambassador, right? That's called referral sales. So what's left for sales? Well, for me, what's left is 2 things. On one hand, you have everything that has to go by building a relationship. Can be offline, online. Yes, I'm going to talk about COVID and online meetings later on. And everything that has to do with the process itself, because how unstructured and how chaotic things may seem, there is a process that is relevant. Now, let's go back to some base. Sales for me has 4 fundamental steps. First one is all about attention. You need to be present where your prospects are consuming content or are spending their time. If you're there, you can get their attention. But attention is not enough. Attention alone will not get you deals. It could actually be very negative. So what we got to do is we got to add another layer, which is trust. People buy when they trust you. So how do you add trust? Well, the best way of getting trust is if others talk about you. So what you got to do is you can actually start enhancing that. Typically, you can do this by having faces in presentations, by using logos in presentations or on website, or by actually giving references. If you have none of that, what you can do is some name dropping. Be a little bit careful, because if you just start dropping names, it's going to go horribly wrong. Most trust is built by your expertise, by the way. So if you talk about their problem and you share some expertise, you'll see that the trust is going to come quickly. Now, here comes a trick. I thought I was done. That's what they teach you. You go online, all these gurus, attention and trust, attention and trust. Yeah. But what you'll notice is a lot of larger deals, they they get stuck or nothing happens, right? One of the problems is not that people say no in your face. The problem is actually they say nothing. They say stuff like, yeah, we haven't made a decision, I need to go back to the board. Or they'll say, yeah, that's very interesting, send me some more shizzle. And they keep you busy. So in a lot of cases, prospects will keep you busy and you don't realize it. But when I look into pipelines and I start asking sales like questions like, so how does the process go? Yeah, I go to a customer, I do a demo, and then I make them a quote. Okay, did you say you would make a quote? Yeah. So, but they're not asking for it. No. So why are you giving yourself that work? Maybe that customer does not need the quote. Maybe they don't want it, but in a very nice way, they're saying, yeah, please do ahead. So you got to be careful there. You got to make sure that you just don't try to shove your quotes into their face. No, you got to ask them, right? I'll go into the process a bit later. How can you ask all of that? Now, here comes a trick. One of the things that's absolutely key in driving, especially larger deals forward, is what I call structure. A structure means it's actually saying, hey, this is how we would help you. We have so much experience with others. Most of those companies, they are helped with this process. So you give them a process. Process gives, or structure gives peace of mind for executives because it makes them think like, oh, these guys have my back, right? Now, structure can also be used for other things. I'm going to show you that straight away. Are we there yet? You see there is one more place for you. Basically, you have to be easy to buy from. Typically, what I see is that you then get a customer, you talk to them, and then they ask you something, and it takes you 2-3 days to come back. It's not going to work. So you have to prioritize. If you have too many deals, which I hope you have, then you have to pick the strategic ones first. If you don't have enough deals, then you have no excuse. Simple as that. I have a YouTube movie that explains this in extreme detail, about 5 minutes. Not going to go into it. The file is available there. Now, I wanted to talk about structure. Structure is something very intriguing because my wife invited me to go to some VIP yard sale, let's call it like that. And we arrived, and I knew it was on a Sunday. So, yard sale, VIP, Sunday, you're thinking the same thing like I'm thinking. I'm thinking, this is going to be horrible, right? And it was horrible. But I was there, and there was a lady that was helping us. We had a private account manager, and this lady would take us through this big warehouse, and she would show all the stuff they were selling. And what she did was she would keep repeating the same phrase. She said, yes, today we can give you 35% because we have all of this in stock. And then what she did was, because the warehouse was constructed in zones, she would take us always across the same point, and on this point there was this sign, and this sign explains why traditional to the left, ignore the Flemish, it's not relevant, it's just a visual. You have all these parts, and that explains very visually why other companies are way more expensive and why they, going from the factory to the shop, immediately to the customer, why they are cheaper and why they are cheaper on this way. This technique is a very B2C sales technique. It's used by insurance brokers, it's used by these type of companies. It is basically relaxing your mind by explaining it in a very visual way. When I do sales, I will always use something visual. I will either have the camera on, moving my hands, or I will draw stuff or use a slide. And what I always want to have in that slide is something like this. This works for B2C, this works for B2B. Okay, another example, if we talk about attention, trust, and structure, well, you can actually combine all of that into one. You've probably seen some of this. These are highly personalized videos. To the left, you have an example of Intuo. Imagine you're Mark. You get an email and it says, hi, Mark, click play. If you're Mark, you're going to click on that button, right? So what these guys do is they make, like, for their strategic clients or prospects, they make 20-second movie clips, which basically say, hey, Mark, great to see you here. Would be even better if we could talk in real life. It's really fun. I mean, they do it in a very fun way, and it worked really, really well. Lots of companies watching this now are thinking three things. One, I never get the software approved. That's another problem. Not going to deal with that. Two, bloody hell, it will not work in my industry because my industry is traditional. You know what's funny? I did this for several companies in extremely traditional industries on purpose to prove they're wrong. And it worked like a dream because nobody's used to that in the traditional sector. I'm dreaming of boring traditional sectors because I know I can eat them alive, right? And then three, of course, it's work. Yes, but don't forget, at the moment, if you start looking into your audience, your prospects, what you'll notice is that there is so much information coming at them that the only way to win or to stand out is to start hyper personalizing. This is an example of hyper personalization. You can do it with an email, you could do it with a text message. There are many ways of doing this. I just wanted to give you the two tools. So Box Bomb Bomb, HubSpot has it too. Try it, play with it, make it part of your daily routine. One of the key elements that people do not talk is for me is that when you get stuck and you're swimming in the lake of rejection and you don't know what to do, one of the key things to solve is to find rhythm. They call that also cadence. So one of the tricks is if I would do 30 cold outreaches, email, LinkedIn, phone, it doesn't matter, you got to try them all, 20, 30 per day, and I keep that up for 2, 3 weeks, I will fundamentally win because I'm doing the work. And this is what I see with a lot of more traditional sales, the classic account manager, the business development. They never learned to do the rhythm. They work on selling via referrals, via network, all of I get it. But that has no scale. It has no volume. I really need you to get to the rhythm and to find the cadence. And of course, you will be successful, as simple as that, because you gotta figure it out. Now, looking at the time, let's talk quickly about closing. Because we got to start with the end. Yeah, everybody tells me, Michael, I have a closing problem in sales. But if I dig deeper, I always figure out it's not really a closing problem. It's actually two other problems. One, there is not enough coming into the machine, not enough leads. That's why I just talked about rhythm, consistency, all of that. And two is once you get into the flow, well, things are not moving fast enough. So let's take a step back, literally, right? Let's look at the customer buying journey. So in a very, very short way to explain this, your prospect is aware of a problem. He goes figure it out. They do not search for the solution. That's where all the websites go wrong. They only talk about their own products. If you have a problem, you don't know the solution. You look for the problem, right? So they're gonna educate themselves. They go Google, they go to the second largest search engine, which is YouTube. Now you know why I have a YouTube channel. They go to YouTube, how to, what is, compare. They select a service or a product and they integrate it into their daily life. Is this reality? Well, it's a trick question. Reality never looks that nice. Reality is always chaotic and messy. So what actually happens is because if somebody searches for something, immediately all these automatic bots and ads and everything gets going and they will be retargeted on Facebook wherever they go with other companies offering this product or service. So it's extremely simple to actually go back and be stuck between education and selection. And what you see is a lot of prospects and customers, they keep ping-ponging between this education and selection. So the question is then, okay, Michael, I get it, but when do I close? Well, that's the green line here. It says not selling. If I'm looking for information, you should not sell to me because I'll hate your guts. As simple as that. We all love to buy. It gives us endorphins. It makes me happy. But we hate it when somebody's trying to sell to us. And yet, 95% of all salespeople, what do? You ask them a question and they start rehearsing their pitch. Yeah, in our company, it's fantastic. We've been existing for 20 years. God, bloody hell. Please don't do that, right? If my house is burning and I'm asking you, my house is burning, I need a fire extinguisher, then you can debate between, oh, we have one with foam and we have one with powder, or we just have a bucket, an ugly bucket of water. It's cheap, right? But the others are really nice. And then you're debating. So most companies teach you to talk about the solution to the fire. But what if there is no fire? Most of your customers have no fire. So we gotta fundamentally start thinking differently in our communication, in the way we do our sales pitch. I mean, it's the same with LinkedIn. You connect to me on LinkedIn and you send me a message. Imagine you want to sell something to me. Say, hey, Michael, I'm an expert in delivering you HR services. I won't even accept you because I know you're going to sell to me, right? Just connect to me, ask me a normal question. I'll answer. That's funny enough, I will answer, right? Now, someone of you is going to try it, right? You should. So let's start using this knowledge into our sales strategy. So if I want to sell to you, who's the most important in this conversation? Me or you? You. So I got to talk about you, right? I got to stop talking about me. And the way to do it is to, one of the techniques, there are several techniques. One of the techniques is actually to talk about their problem. And then if you can enlarge the problem, well, maybe the house will get on fire. Let me explain a bit more. Here are some statistics where people just basically don't trust any sales problem. And if you really think about it, not selling is the new sales. It's 10 times more subtle and it will have way more impact. The day I realized, and I used to run a team with lots and lots of salespeople, the day I realized that I had to stop selling, that's the day I doubled my revenue. Very weirdly, but it worked. Now, in order to understand this properly, we got to understand this one, this number. This 2% is the conversion ratio if you go out into the world and you talk about your product or service. Right? And I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and it took me many, many years to show you the next, the next slide. Is that what we do is we talk about our product or service, what our product can do. It's like a shortcut in time, right? And the thing is, if you do that, there is only 2% of people, their house is on fire. So how do we deal with it? Well, we should not stop with that, but we should kind of refocus our energy on another journey. The journey always starts with something inspiration. You in this webinar, you saw something probably of me somewhere and then saw, hey, this man is doing a webinar, let's join. So one is inspiration. You can have a better career. You can be a better sales. You can grow your business. And then I made a logical mistake. My logical mistake was something very basic. I thought I inspire you and you would buy my stuff, right? No, what all of you will do is let's go look for information, how to do it yourself. And you're right. That's exactly what you should do. But it means that almost all of your prospects will do the same. It is not because you share your best type of content or your best ideas that they can operationalize it. They will hire you or buy your product because that's the solution to the answer, right? And in the meantime, you get known. I can know because I wrote a book about it called Nobody Knows You, right? And I told you there is no catch in these webinars, and I mean it. There is no catch. I would appreciate if you buy the book, but fundamentally, here is no catch. So let me give you some pragmatic advice. The other technique is, so stop talking immediately about what the solution is. Now, first go to the problem. 2, you got to learn to give choice. Choice is extremely powerful because if I tell you what to do, you will not do it. You're human. It's normal. You're like, fuck this guy. What does he know, right? So we got to do something else. And here's an example of the final slide of a company called Settlement, which is they built the best blockchain platform in the world. Matthew can pay me the $50 later. But what they do at the end is actually literally at the end of the sales deck, they say next steps, and they give you 2 choices. On one end, it's something like this demo, a customized demo. It's basically saying if your house is burning or you see the smoke, we can shortcut that now, but we also give you an alternative that if you're not ready, you can come to the webinar or you can read our book or you can do whatever they want, but you always give 2 choices. And the 2 choices are always 1, talk to the expert, get a meeting, dig a bit deeper, shortcut time. And 2 is something educational, inspirational. But Michael, my company does not make this stuff. Well, don't overthink it. You can write a nice LinkedIn post and use that as something and say, hey, here is the 5 steps how to do something. Don't overthink it. Just think something inspirational, educational that keeps them into the loop. Now, process. Let's go to process. And I'm watching time because we still have 15 minutes. So I'm showing you now a rather classic sales process that works for, let's say, 85% of my customers. This can be done in 18 months. This can be done in literally a day. In essence, it always starts with something that's called qualification. I have to figure out that the person in front of me actually can buy my stuff. In essence, that's where it comes down to. And you have many methodologies to do qualification. I checked once. I think there are 32 methodologies to do this. So let me give you a very simple one. It's Band. I know some people really don't like it, but in essence, it's still okay. One, do they have the budget to pay for this thing, right? Whatever you offer. Two, are you talking to the right person? Big companies, probably the board, or somewhere else. Three, do they really need it? And four, what's the time frame? And here is how I do it. I will always start at the end. I will listen to the people. I will actually talk about problems, and I'll try. I try to shut up, which is hard for me, right? But I'll try to shut up and ask lots of questions, and then I would ask a question something like, "Okay, so if you want to do this, what would be the time you want to go live with this?" And if they don't know, or they don't answer, or they're like, well, it's going to go nowhere. If they will tell you exactly, oh, in 2 months' time, we got to be live because blah, 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 blah. You're on something. And then you work your way back. You basically say, okay, if you want to be live, then we'll need about 3 weeks to implement. How long would it take to get through your procurement if it's a large company? Who would decide? Is it you that can decide? It's very normal, healthy questions. A lot of salespeople are afraid to ask these questions, but you got to ask these questions, right? Maybe not in the first meeting, but in the second meeting. You qualify, figure it out, you present your stuff, you make a quote, you negotiate. That's where it takes the longest, can be very long, depends on what type of business you're in. They say yes, but you don't have the PO yet. You close, you get the order, and you party, right? Now, if deals get stuck, I call it fridge. Deals get stuck for various reasons. The main reason is because the urgency is not high enough. That's your biggest problem. If people ask me, Michael, I have a problem moving my deals forward, or I can't ask enough money for it, you have the same problem. It is not important enough. Your problem is not big enough, right? So you got to fix that. I'll go there immediately. If deals get stuck too long, I put them in something I call the nurture queue. And actually, it's 100%, but it should be 0%. The nurture queue is where you put deals and where you will actually go to and say to them, hey, yes, you see COVID times, you hear my kids in the background screaming. We all have that problem. So you basically put deals there, and what you will do is you will approach them with marketing and with the right messaging, so to get them back into your flow. And there is a probability of 15%, by the way, to get them back into the flow. Now, typically sales process, when we dream about it, you have somebody new starts phoning, emailing, going to meetings, events, receptions, and then basically as time progresses, they build up a nice funnel, right? Right? No, it's not right. This is what all the CRM systems try to put on Google and try to sell to you. But I have a strong opinion. But if I tell my opinion, then YouTube is going to ban me. So I'm going to just show it in the screen what I'm thinking of it. Reality is this. You basically start phoning, and then you get your first meetings. And these meetings, you have to go back 4 or 5 times, and you have to make a quote, think about the quote. And basically all your attention is drawn away into the sales process. What's the impact? You get fluctuating revenues. So when you build a machine, you got to do it differently. Your machine, you got to pull apart, and you have to make sure that you keep pouring fuel in the machine, which are leads. And on the other hand, you got to have the machine that runs, that pushes you through. I'm going to explain how to push that through in the next slides. The fuel, how you keep pouring fuel, I will explain in one of the next webinars, how you actually build that. Now, so if you think about your sales engine, fuel, machine, in the middle, it's what I call the conversation. It's not sales, it's like a conversation that makes them, you give them 2 choices, and they will decide where they go, and that is how you can maneuver them. Now, let's quickly touch upon sales methodologies. Do-it-yourself, transactional selling, I'm not going to go there today. Let's talk about solution selling. 20 years ago, my boss used to say, Michael, you got to sell solutions. What does it mean? Your prospect knows exactly the problem. When they know exactly the problem, they can compare solutions. So what happens is they will buy quickly, but the problem is you're in a bad spot because it's easy to compare. It means you always get a lot of price pressure. So the reaction to that was actually, it went together with the rise of the consultancy agencies. And what they did was they would they would have prospects that said something's wrong, but they didn't know exactly what. So consultative selling is a very different approach. Is where you go first, figure out what the real problem is, and then the magical solution is to work with you. The problem there is that sales cycles started extending suddenly because you have a big pre-sales part and you have this thing of called proof of concepts. People didn't trust it, so they said, "Give me the software, show it to me," and you had to do all the work up front. Reaction to that, and that goes exactly together with the rise of startups and scale-ups, is what do you do if you invented something and the world has no clue they need it, right? So that technique is called provocative selling. You got to provoke them. Now, the big question, of course, is how do you do it then? Well, because a classic flow goes from why do I need it to why do I need it now, and why should I work with you? And I basically want you to reverse this. I want you to start with you. That's why I've written a book about Nobody Knows You, because if you can start by sharing, surfacing your expertise, people will come to you to learn from you. And then if you infuse them with why they should do it now, well, they will buy. Because when I do a forecast or a pipeline review, I ask them a question. I said, so why do they need it now? And I tell you, if you can't answer that question, your pipeline will go down the drain because it's a fundament of speed. The nice word you're looking for is deal velocity. Now, Michael, can you solve it? Well, I can actually. So here is the technique. Depending who you talk to, prospects will be in different categories. So I'm going to teach you the three straight away. Category one, prospect comes to you and knows exactly what they want. This is my problem. This is what I want. What do you do to speed it up? You basically will tell them what you're talking about, this problem. It is far greater in magnitude and it needs an alternative approach. You, my friend, are underestimating the problem. And that will create tension internally, and they will think, I didn't think and they will move faster. Now, second scenario, prospect comes to you and says, there is something wrong, but I'm not sure. You do something else. You basically say, you listen, and then you say, well, the problem you think you have is easier to fix. It is more manageable. That will give them peace of mind. And they'll think, oh, and how? Off you go. Third one is, you come somewhere, they don't know they have a problem. What do? You say, something's coming, it's coming fast, it's gonna hurt you like hell, and it's not gonna go away. Of course, you have to do that in a more subtle way, but in essence, that is what you have to do. The big magic is the difference between a good sales and a great sales is in the way you formulate this, because it needs to lead to your unique solution. Now, words matter. If you go to people that love to buy stuff, you got to do inspirational language, inspirational words, disruptive. Don't use it anywhere else. If you go to more mature markets, you got to do something else. You got to use educational language, talk about use cases, others, all of that. That works really, really well. I wanted to quickly touch upon hierarchy and a pitch. In a company, you always have layers. And the reason why B2B sometimes goes really slow is because you have to cross the layers, and you have two layers. You have everything that's operations and everything that's strategic. Now, here comes the trick. What is the pitch to these layers? Well, if we go strategic, they only care about revenue or cost reduction. And if I have to give 1,000,000, I will always choose for the revenue pitch because it's the promise of new. It's hard to calculate. If you tell me you're only into cost reduction, I can calculate and I can tell you that's too expensive, right? And the language is no detailed strategic vision, all that stuff. Now, if I go to operations, you have to think like this. Strategic talks about the day of tomorrow, the future. Operations, they talk about today. Fix my problem today. It's very technical, short-term problems. Now, when I get back home, I do something else. I do not, if I would do a pitch, I will always provide the material for the other. So strategic, they need to go to the board or they need to convince the operations, right? So I'll give them material for the operation. If I go to operations, they'll need material for either their boss or the people around them. So always create the material for the decision maker. Now, Let's very quickly talk about follow-up before I start wrapping up, and we start going to questions. So if we start thinking about sales deals, what do? We always do the same thing. We search a deal, we interact, and we forget. And we keep going. I call this the one-night stand strategy. I think you all immediately understand what I'm talking about. Now, why don't we do it differently? If we really start thinking, so we first engage with somebody, and then we talk, and then it goes down for a week, and then you talk again, and eventually you negotiate and you come to a deal, right? You close the deal. And what happens then is that you walk away, you kind of walk through the desert, you forget them, they forget you, and if you're not careful, you get stuck in the swamp of amnesia. They completely ignore you. But at a certain stage, you should actually touch them again, either to renew a license or renew a service or sell more. So what you got to do actually is, at a certain stage, you got to touch them again. And I've called this the "is everything okay" strategy. Because if you just send them an email, or you just phone them up, or you just send them a text and say, "I have been thinking of you," that alone is enough to trigger a reaction. And the big theory, what everybody does wrong, is when you have a new product, somebody phone them up, say, "Hey, I have a new product." No, don't do it. Just ask them, "How are you doing?" Even now with COVID, you should just take time every day, phone a few people. "How are you doing? Are you fine?" Because people, when you're in the trenches and when you're in bad times, you never forget the one that helps you. But if you're only there when it's fun, you will be easily forget. So what do we do? Why do we do this? Because cost of sales is more interesting. You have the trust, so it's easier to build. But the problem is always time, right? You're gonna say, "Yeah, but Michael, I have 1,000 things to do." I get it. I have 1,000 things to do myself. So the way to solve it is either you plan the machine, 20 contacts per day. You basically get this technique there where you find a cadence of doing it every single day. It can be you, somebody else. You just got to start communicating. The other thing you got to remember that value always wins, even if you lose. One of the things I learned is that I'm not so interested in winning a deal. It's very intriguing, but I learned I never ever want to lose. So even if I would lose like a deal, I would never forget it, and I would keep kind of going back to make them my customers, right? It's just a different way of operating. And you probably need both. You need the guys that really want to close short term, and then you have the guys like me that's go, "We have time, but I'll get them," right? The trenches strategy I explained, and I thought of you strategy I also explained. Now, follow up is absolutely key. I see a lot of salespeople not following up. Basically, there is a lot of statistics, you see it here in the screen, that there is an enormous hidden opportunity that if you have deals and you don't follow up, that within the next 9 months, they will buy. But if you're not there, they will buy with somebody else. So how do you build the machine? You need more channels. A lot of you probably in B2B are all LinkedIn these days. I think LinkedIn should be about 30% of your sales strategy, of your outreach strategy. But you still have a phone, you still have cold emailing. And there are lots of other exotic stuff, which I'll probably talk about in one of the next webinars that we can do. I've added an agenda how this could look like, and I know it's going to be scary, but this is pure cadence, pure rhythm. If you keep that up for 2-3 days, I'm going to tell you your business is going to fundamentally change. Consistency is key, and of course, measuring, I don't need to explain. It's obvious that if you got to know what you're doing. So one of the questions that kept coming back, and I want to add this on purpose, is a physical meeting the same as an online meeting? Does it have the same impact? And I say yes, but two things you got to remember during COVID times. One, if you meet somebody physically, you can touch them. That means your trust will go higher. You have this conversation. If you do that online, it's not going to work. So what you got to do is something else. You first don't plan the same thing like you would do a physical meeting. Physical meeting being 1 hour, right? Just saying something, 1 hour. What you do is you think differently. I need to make it 30 minutes. And actually selling the value of doing it shorter will make you get more meetings. That's one. Two, also think that you don't need one meeting, you probably need two, because it's harder to generate trust. So if you replace your 1 hour physical meeting and you got to drive there, go back, by two 30-minute meetings or 20-minute meetings, you will be almost as efficient. Not the same, but you will be almost as efficient. But it's a different way of thinking, because that also means that your first meeting is not about closing, it's actually getting to the second meeting. That's what everybody does wrong. First meeting is to get to the second meeting. So that's where you use a technique of the two options, right? And of course, If you can add a visual, something visual, a slide, a paper, something you show, a video. I don't care. I always put on the video myself first because it's like an etiquette thing. They'll put it on. Work visually because that generates more trust, and the reason why is because I feel like I can touch it. So, few more things before we wrap up. Always have your next actions. Always think of your next actions. Your first meeting is probably to get to your second meeting, unless you're B2C, then you just want to close straight away. To follow up, we talked about it. Absolute key. Be like crazy. How many times do you need to follow up? Well, there's lots of statistics. What I've seen is that minimum 5-6 times. Actually, that's the best. But don't do it linear. Not 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. People just don't work like that. Do 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 5 days, 4 weeks. See, make it asynchronous. That works really, really, really well. Quotes, if you send big, complex quotes, please present it. Don't just send it because they're going to be lost. Also, what I do is the presentation and the quote, I will split them apart. I want the quote to be 2 pages because I can have more impact with 2 pages or 1 page than I give you 60 slides, right? And the last one, make your product or service, it's intangible at the end of the day. Try and make it as tangible as possible. The reason why I made a book and stickers and all stuff, because it makes it very tangible. And if we can touch it, we trust it. Now, wrapping up, I talked about the lake of rejection. I'm absolutely sure that if you would just follow one of these slides, it's going to be you on the lake of rejection within the boat. So what I'm going to do now next is I wanted to share you where you can find more information. There's a whole YouTube filled with this stuff. There is also the next session is next Friday, 1 o'clock. Don't forget, today is the Friday the 13th, and we're doing this at 1 o'clock, right? So next week, it's all about sales storyline, sales pitching. How do you make the perfect deck? And I tell you up front, so many companies have really horrible decks, right? So we gotta fix that. And I'm just gonna share how I do it so you can learn yourself. There is the barcode in there. If you scan that thing, you actually get access to it, or you just use the same link as you got to get here, and I'll put it into the chat later on. So thank you for watching. Thank you for being there. I'm now going to go to the questions and just type whatever you want to ask into the chat. I'm going to look at the time, and I have about another 10, 12 minutes for you. So let's go there. Any questions? Okay, I'm gonna start reading because there's a lot of stuff in here. Hello, everybody. Okay. Soapbox, okay. HubSpot video, yes, we talked about it. Medic is really completely different than band. Yes, I agree. There is a big difference. At the end of the day, we can go into a lot of detail on all these methodologies. Medic is solution selling. For me, it also depends on what you're selling. So I give you a very good example. If you're into SaaS business, you don't have a precise moment when you qualify. You're basically re-qualifying the whole time because people can just stop the service. So Medic and some of these methodologies just don't work really well in SaaS. They work more in a product selling environment. Strongman, yes. Any other questions, guys? Just hit up. I'm there. You have my time. Let me know. This recording will be available, by the way, later on. You know me, some of you know me. I'm going to cut it in pieces, put it on YouTube, make a podcast out of it. So we'll share it and you'll actually get the link after this one. Here, Oliver, how would you start a call using your hot not selling strategy? Well, it's a very good question. I would actually do it very differently. I would, first of all, the first connection is you always try to get some kind of connection, right? I got your name from, or I'm phoning you because you got to do there. And then I start asking some questions. How do you do that? I've always been wondering how companies and what I've seen, and whoop, you're off. People like to talk, and then I'll get quickly to problem and all of that. And then traditionally what happens, and this is also a technique that you can use as a conversation on LinkedIn, traditionally what happens is if you don't talk about yourself, suddenly they will ask, but what do you do, right? Now, I know you're impatient. I know you're too eager for this. You can kind of go there. And what I always do is the same. I'll talk about their problem. I'll try to enlarge it a bit. I'll try to like say, well, I was at that company and they solved it this way, or you could do it that way. So I give them choice. And I say, actually, that's what my company does. We exist to solve that problem, right? So it's a bit that pitch. Now, if we go cold calling, that's very, very specific because you got to get them to say yes within the first X amount of seconds. So cold calling is actually a separate webinar one day where we'll organize this. Tips for selling insurances. Well, I do actually, because I just helped two very large banks to train their agents. One of the things that I've seen with insurances is that, of course, you're trying to sell something which is not, I mean, the house is not on fire, right? You're trying to sell something that potentially could happen, right? But then yet they still need insurances, right? So to cut my answer very shortly, it depends a bit what you're selling. And two, I think you should, especially now for insurances, I would go like crazy on LinkedIn connecting to people, because I did a study together with my good buddy Erendis, and what we saw is that only 7% of the banks and insurances are using LinkedIn. So I would like go like madman on LinkedIn connecting to people. How do you manage an online event at best, Paul? That's a very good question. I do believe, we didn't talk about it, but I do believe in webinars. I used to hate them. I'm back into it. Fundamentally, you got to keep them short. This actually is too long. So in a dream scenario, you can talk 20, 30 minutes because of attention span. Two, don't do the classic. Hi, my name is, I have this company, my partner in this thing is Microsoft, that's the company. No, you just dive in. Then you say, hey, this is what we do. Let me share some use cases. And you can make it very, very attractive. I think also that the element of design, I know it's expensive when you start out, but you see my slides, it all has this high quality feeling. I do spend a lot of time on visualizing my idea, because if I can visualize and I can show it to you and you get it within 3 seconds, well, that's perfect. By the way, I've put my email on every single slide, right? So every single slide, if you would take a screenshot or you would take something out of it, it is extremely actionable. Make sure if you do webinars and anything, always lead them to the next thing, the next action. Here is more to learn. You can contact me, something like this. This webinar was not intended. Again, there is no catch, but normally I would do that, right? No catch, yeah, of course, buy my book. Well, you should have bought it already, by the way. Many questions. What's your opinion on breakup mails? There is a whole, if you start reading the Americans, because we got to make a difference between, I think, some of the European countries and the American sales approach. There is a whole, if you start reading books like Russell Brunson, .com Secrets, the guru of funneling, he likes these breakup mails, and they have a pretty high hit ratio, apparently. I tried it with several companies and we weren't really successful with it. Actually, we sometimes got the opposite effect. I think it depends on the product you're selling. I think also in a B2C environment, it's going to work better. I do think in following up, but what I would do is I would get very creative with the titles and the subject lines. So one of the subject lines I used, for instance, to launch my book was I would send out emails to people saying, my mother is very worried. Now that's so intriguing that I saw the opening rates and they were 90+%, right? Because that's a weird sentence. In certain industries like insurance, you can't send something like that. I mean, the company will never allow you to send something like that. But one of the things I also do is would send stuff like, I've been thinking about you. It works every single time. Thanks, Jan, for buying the book. Let me look. Which methodology would you use for selling 25K, 100K CRM projects, Alex? That's a good question. You have a big problem if you're trying to sell a CRM, because there are 2,200 CRMs in the world currently, and they're all fighting for the same piece of attention. So what I would do is I would probably be very provocative, a bit over the top on purpose, because it's the only thing you can do to really stand out. The other thing I would do is I would make tons and tons and tons of use cases. If you're selling a CRM, Here is a good example. You have a company in Belgium called Team Leader, right? Team Leader is a CRM. What they do is you start looking into their YouTube and all of it. They talk a lot about what they do. If you then look to some other CRMs that actually are bigger, let's say some American ones, even HubSpot, they talk about them, but most of their content is all geared around how can you win with sales? So HubSpot, for instance, grew like crazy because they started pushing this free training, free sales training, right? And they made it part of the pitch. If you look to, for instance, Belgium, and you look to Salesflare, for instance, what they're doing really well is they found a way to communicate. It's a bit clickbaity, but the top 25 sales methodologies, and they go a bit provocative. And what they do is they kind of steal all the SEO from others. I mean, simply they ask me, Michael, what's your training? What's it named? Can we use it on our website? And of course, I give it to them, and then they're trying to steal pieces everywhere. So selling CRM, not an easy one. I do think there is a big market for it, but I would try to be very, very different and go niche. The richness, my friends, is always in the niches. So if you can, and how do you get to a niche? That's another question. One of the stupid things I really learned is when you start looking into sales language. And sales language is something very intriguing. So here's an example of Marie Forleo, which is a guru in building business. She doesn't say, here is an interview. No, she will say, this is an inspiring interview for creative entrepreneurs. The use of adjectives aims the gun. So the second thing that she did was that inspiring interviews is something you want. And then she says, for creative entrepreneurs. See, you want to be the creative entrepreneur. So you got to start thinking in your language and in your slides to start adding the market you're targeting, to start adding adjectives, because it's extremely powerful. If you check my YouTube, sometimes my titles, some of them are really, really optimized for this, and some of them I forgot it, and you really see the numbers of the views. They go weirdly. One of the other weird things is if you use the word ultimate, you always have more views. I still don't know why, but people like the ultimate. Huh? It's like this song, The Ultimate Seduction, right? Good, guys, I'm gonna wrap up because it is time and I promise to keep it short. If you have more questions, find me on LinkedIn, just ask them. I have a hard time not to answer because I like to help. See you all next Friday for the sales presentations, and then we can dig deep. Thanks all for joining. Catch you later. See you on LinkedIn. Bye.